Okay, call to order for a Watertown City Council meeting for June 5th of 2023. Please rise while Councilman Vilhauer leads us in prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, as we gather tonight to go about the city business, always help us keep in mind that the citizens of this community are your sons and daughters, our brothers and sisters, and that we need to do right by them. We are so blessed to have the staff that takes care of the day-to-day activities in the community. And now we ask for your wisdom and guidance that we may make decisions that are pleasing to for your children. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Finance Officer Bob Zine, please call the roll.
Okay. Bueller. Danforth.
Here.
Pauline.
Here.
Paulson. Shetty.
Here.
Tupper.
Here.
Vilhauer.
Here.
Thank you.
Quorum is established. With that, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with one change. We are going to remove item F from the consent agenda, item F. So with that change, chair will entertain a motion. Motion made by Councilman Shetty, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Any discussion on that, Council? Councilman Danforth.
I just have one question, if I may, on the consent. On those, on the ambulance MOUs, are those renewals or is that something that's new? They're new. So it's a whole new scenario?
Yeah, those communities have recently lost their ambulance service. So we're entering into new agreements with them. They're prorated for this year since it's halfway through the year, but then they'll be ongoing going forward.
Any further question, Councilman? Would you like to remove it?
Well, the only question I have is I know we have, and we're going to have some on there anyway, about the write-offs, you know, so I'm wondering in the fee that we're charging is where are we at and what we think that, what does that mean long-term to us in regards to our cost for equipment, manning, et cetera, for what I think is a relatively small fee cost.
We have Chief Rowland here. Chief, if you'd like to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Danforth. Basically, the townships that we have in our county, there's 18 of them. We currently have 14 townships that are in agreement until 2024, December 31st. And the 3 townships that Amanda alluded to, City Manager Mack alluded to, are from the South Shore Ambulance District. We are currently going to put those on the same time frame as the other 14 townships and the 4 villages. So they'll run concurrent through December 31st. And at that point in time, we'll relook at changing our fee structure. And the MOU that's going to be in place with those folks are in the same context as the other ones.
All right. The motion is to approve the consent agenda as amended with F removed. All those, any further discussion? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Now is the time for public comments. If anyone is here who would like to address the council on something that is not on tonight's agenda, now is your time to do so. Mayor Karen, welcome.
Thank you. My name's Sarah Karen, and I'm here to ask the council members to please put consideration of the bids for the showmobile on the council agenda so that you can have open comment and discussion about it. The city manager reminded me that it's once city-owned property is declared surplus, there's no further action required by the council to get rid of it. So since you've already taken that action and declared the showmobile to be surplus, a staff member could, as soon as the bids are open, award them to somebody. So I'm asking you to please intercept that process and consider the bids publicly and have a discussion amongst yourselves, if for no other reason than for the sake of transparency. And I think that would be a good step to take. My position is that the showmobile still has an important quality of life function for our community, even though we have the beautiful Community Foundation Plaza stage, and I supported that greatly. And I want things to happen there. We're just not sure if some of the things that we're planning to do there will work. And there are some things that are just flat inappropriate to do there. So there will still be a need for the showmobile in our community. It's already bought and paid for. And, you know, you do have to do maintenance on it. I know it's a pain to set up, but the quality of life amenities that we have don't come for free. And I just would like you to wait and make sure everything's working out before you get rid of that showmobile. So it takes 2 council members to put an item on the agenda. And since those bids are being open real soon, you have to do that right now. So before Wednesday when the bids are open. So that's all. I just would like you to take your time with this. Don't rush into the elimination of something that is a quality of life amenity for our community before you get rid of it. Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone else is here to address the council on something that is not on tonight's agenda, even if it has been previously discussed, you may have that opportunity now.
Thank you. My name is Tim Sheehan with the Watertown Area Chamber of Commerce. Well, we appreciated the use of the showmobile for many, many, many years. I'd like to see this thing extended at least throughout the end of this year. There's several groups that have got it booked. I know I've got it booked for 3 nights or 3 days out at Cookanacopeska. I know the rodeo's got it booked. There's several other organizations that I'm sure they have it booked. I'm just not aware of them. But I would like to see it at least pushed back to this fall, give us a chance to get through this season and then put it up for bids again, or maybe award those bids at that time. But I'd like to see it stay at least till fall. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council?
Doug Herr is my name. I direct the city band, and my biggest concern, I'm very excited about doing performances uptown or downtown, but I'm not positive the band will fit on that stage that was built. And until we get a feel of if that's going to work or not, I would like you to maybe hang on to the showmobile, if for no other reason, just to be sure that we're going to be able to perform in that space. So that's really all I have to add.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Any further public comment? Okay, I'll close public comment. I will let council know if anyone would like to make that motion. The appropriate time to do so would be under new business tonight, because it would be a new motion. So that would be the time to do that. So might have some time to wait if you wanted to stick around, but I do believe that it will likely be that motion made. That the chair will entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda with 2 changes. We are going to be removing item E, and we will be moving item G to the top of the docket. So those 2 changes. Motion made by Councilman Vilhauer, seconded by Councilman Bueller or Tupper? Bueller. Any discussion on that, council? All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item G is an approval of a bid award for the 2023 Parks and Recreation Improvements Bike Trail Reconstruction Project 2309 to BX Civil and Construction in the amount of $345,000. For more information, we'll go to our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eyck.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The Engineering Division of Public Works has helped the Park and Rec Department with bidding some bike trail reconstruction work. This project is being helped managed by Justin Peterson, the Assistant City Engineer, and maybe more directly through the Park and Rec Director, Dusty Roddick. I don't know if he's not. Oh, there he is over there, hiding behind the column. So I'd steer any specific questions their way this evening, but we've helped Park and Recs put together a bid. We've received the bids for that work on some bike path rehabilitation, if you will, some areas of town that needed some attention. I believe Dusty brought forward a funding request in the existing funds that he has available in one of the park budgets. So with that, our low bidder for this work was BX Civil, and staff is recommending approval of this bid award.
Thank you. Parks and Rec Director, do you want to add anything to this?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The only thing I would add to this is this funding was actually carryover money from previous years. We're looking to reconstruct a half-mile section that is, arguably, but not too much arguably, the worst section of trail in the entire system. It's honestly a liability to the city at this point. So we've identified that and are going to reconstruct that. Most of our trails are asphalt. This particular section, due to the nature of the hydrology and adjacent marshes, we're going to go with concrete on this one. Future projects, we're going to be looking at asphalt overlays and things like that. But this particular application is going to make sense to do concrete. That's all I would have to add. I would stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the bid award. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Shetty. Open it up for council discussion. Councilman Villauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, Dusty, where precisely is this for those that are watching and wondering?
This would be approximately that half-mile section. I'd try the best way to describe that. You've got South Lake Drive, and then you've got the convenience store. So it's that section along Highway 20 between those 2 points, and there's just large holes, and they've tried to be patched in the past, and it's ugly.
Follow up.
Thank you. I got a lot of complaints about that stretch of the bike trail the last couple of years, so I wholeheartedly agree that we should be looking at this. Obviously, it's not the only stretch of our bike trail that needs attention, but this is a bad stretch.
Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Has the drainage been looked at in this area? Obviously, I think concrete's the way to go because of the wet conditions that we see continually in that area. But still, I don't know if you've looked at the drainage in the area to see if there's a better solution for some of that too in those ditches.
Yeah, I guess, Heath, you could take that, but the drainage is consistent with
Yeah,
the rest of the right-of-way.
Justin, if you could speak to any drainage improvements that were considered or incorporated into the plans, please.
There are 3 culverts being added to the project, and it's going to be raised up slightly to try to help with the drainage in that area.
Any follow-up, Councilman? Councilman Danforth.
Thank you, Mayor. General observation that I've had on our bike trails for years, and I'm not trying to be an engineer, so I'm just going to throw out the concern, is we have a tendency to put these bike trails in areas that are less desirable areas where we have lowland areas, or we have lots of trees, or whatever we have. And they just don't last. And, it seems like between the lowland areas that are either eroding or the bike trails break up, or we put them in amongst trees and the tree roots are just destroying the bike trails. I mean, it's a great asset for us, but I'm extremely concerned with what our ongoing maintenance is going to be, and we're going to be looking to add to our bike trails. Are we designing these in a manner that best puts them in a position for longevity, or are we just designing them, and I say just, are we designing them in a manner that gets them in place and we just deal with it later? Because it just seems like we have a lot of problems. And then secondarily, if you are on these trails, there are a number of either dead trees or trees that have significant dead branches and such with them that are a liability potentially to somebody on those trails. The question with that is, whose trees are these? For example, Dusty, right along Highway 20, right along there, there's a number of them.
Yep,
I don't know if there are trees.
Yeah,
or
I know
landowner
exactly the
but-
trees you're talking about, and I've actually spoken with our forestry supervisor. He actually brought them to my attention as well, and those are gonna be removed as a part of this project.
Oh, good.
You know, and to back up a little bit, to your first point, I don't know about current design and what have you. This particular section, actually the longevity on it has been very good. It was built in the early 80s. So, you know, this particular section should have been replaced 10 years ago, but that section was built very well. We did some crack sealing of a 2-mile section, you know, back towards town. And we've got a grant that we applied for for an additional 2 miles of overlay as we head west. So this particular section has held up well. There's others that I've noticed that not so much, but that's kind of where we're focusing on this one because it's kind of, you know, one of the keystones of the trail system.
You know, this one's been lucky enough that it's got elevation to it, even though we're gonna add some to that, but we have a lot of places where the bike trail is just at ground zero, so to speak. And it creates problems, and I know up in the northeast part, the trails literally are backing up water flow, you know, up in the Cherry Creek area. And so it's just a general observation of maybe we're better off putting more money into them up front and doing it right and from a design standpoint than we are to, and I'm not suggesting that we aren't doing it right, but you know, maybe that effort needs to be looked at anyway. So just an observation.
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. And I agree with appreciate you guys' work on the concrete, using it there, and I'm sure there's other areas down the road we'll be doing that because it makes a big difference. My question actually is kind of more on the bidding process, I guess. So maybe if Mr. Von Eye or someone could answer this one, or Mr. Peterson. I just noticed that on the bids, there's about a 20 to 22% difference. On 60% of the bid was the concrete work, and I just kind of struck my eye that there's a big gap from the lower bid. Like I say, from the other two bids, 20 to 22% higher in the concrete portion of it, like 60% of the entire bid. Just that's one of my questions. Is that something that happens, I guess, in the construction world, or?
Yeah, Councilman Schutte, it certainly can. Contractors' numbers are exactly that, contractors' numbers, and we oftentimes can try to guess or estimate where they're coming from with some of those numbers, but oftentimes we're just left in the dark and dealt with the cards they presented in their bids. And so why those were that far off, we can't really speak to that. What we do, though, is when we're reviewing the bids, we look for any anomalies like that, and we confirm with the apparent low bidder that they are comfortable and confident with their bid and would like to proceed as it was bid. And those discussions are really the extent that we take in reviewing some of those anomalies and making sure that they're still confident moving forward with their bid.
That was my concern, I guess. Yeah, I appreciate you doing that, just to make sure that if there is anything that they're missing, that there's not an issue down the road on something like this. And then my other question is, what is mobilization? I kind of think I have an idea what it is, but just if you guys get in the bid, that was another big chunk there that was in the bid. What is mobilization?
So, Councilman, that is a it's a guaranteed price for the contractor that generally it's intended for their cost to get their supplies, their equipment, their materials, their manpower to the site. It's to mobilize, in some cases, to the community, in some cases to the specific area with all their workforce needs that they need to put into that. That number, too, can vary quite a bit. Different contractors use that number differently than others. Some will tuck some certain overhead costs into that number that others don't. But again, it's a number that's consistently in pretty much all of our engineering bids that we perform. And the general intent is it's to mobilize the contractor to the site.
And yeah, the reason I asked, and thank you, the reason I asked that was just, I noticed that the difference of the estimate from the engineering department was, it was about a $32,000 difference from the lowest bid, and the mobilization was there's a $28,000 difference. They are higher than the estimate. So that was pretty much the difference. You know, granted, it's give and take, you know, from one category to the other, but it caught my eye, so I didn't know if and all the estimates were quite higher in that particular department. So I thought, well, as we down the road do these estimates, maybe we put a little bit more in the mobilization to you know, to not be, you know, that much lower than what the, you know, the estimate versus the actual bids. But again, just an observation I had there. So, but I appreciate all your work on this, and I guess that's all I have for now.
Councilman Tupper.
This one's for Director Roddick. Do you plan on trying to do X amount of maintenance every year on our trails? I think for years we've kind of lacked taking care of what we've had, so hopefully you got a good plan on doing some maintenance every year, you know, a certain dollar amount or whatever. We do.
Again, there was a substantial amount of dollars carried over from the past. It's our intention to at least fund a certain amount of trail repair rehabilitation annually to help guide that. We do have a contract with the pavement management system that did similar assessments on the city streets. We're going to use that same format to identify and prioritize our trail planning, you know, for repairs as we go into the future.
Have they did their pavement management testing yet, or?
No, they have not. They looking for a final schedule, I guess, start date. They're hoping to be here sometime in the next couple weeks, and then we'll have the report roughly 6 weeks after that.
I'm glad to see that we're, you know, it's just like building a road and never taking care of it, because that's basically what's happened to our trails over the years, and glad to see we got a long-term plan. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, the motion is to approve the bid award. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item A is a second reading of an ordinance amendment on off-street loading minimum requirements. Public Works Director Heath Von Eye, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. If the council could recall at the first reading, this is kind of a housekeeping item. We have off-street loading facility requirements for our industrial zoned areas. Well, really for most commercial industrial zoned areas in town, there's certain regulations they have to abide by. The I-2 district currently allows loading docks to be within their front yard, if you will, of their lot. The I-1 zone currently does not allow that. That was a clerical error, if you will. We had changed the I-1 to be one of the exceptions that does allow for the front yard or street frontage area to include loading docks. Of course, it still has to be all self-contained within their property, within their site, so that they're not using the street as a maneuvering area for their loading and unloading. But when we rewrote some of the off-street parking requirements here a little while back, that inadvertently got put in the wrong way as it used to read, and I-1 does not allow that exception. So we're simply clearing that up as a housekeeping item, so that both the I-1 and I-2 districts are exempt from prohibiting those front yards as a loading dock area. This would be important for you know, a number of the industrial parks in town that are zoned I-1 that currently do and still could continue to develop in that manner in a way that would not compromise, like I said, the through traffic or the streets that are adjacent to those properties. With that, Brandy Hanton, Community Development Manager, is here with us tonight, and her I stand by for any questions.
All right. Sorry, we're okay, yeah, I'm just trying to complete blank. I was looking at something. So I will open up a public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to testify on this item? Close the public hearing, open it up for council action. Do I have a motion to approve the ordinance amendment? Motion made by Councilman Vilhauer, second by Councilman Bueller. Open it up for discussion. Council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the ordinance amendment. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item B is a first reading of an ordinance amending the zoning map of the city of Watertown for Lot 1 South Dakota Livestock Sales Company lots from its current designation of I-1 Light Industrial District to C3 Highway Commercial District. Public Works Director Heath Von High, you will have first say on this.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the first reading of an application for rezone brought to the council by the city. We are the landowners here for this particular parcel. I'll share my screen to Teams for the map. This, of course, is related to the street facility property, the 27 acres that we purchased to build a new street maintenance facility along Highway 20. This triangular area outlined in a turquoise color is the area in question that's being proposed for a rezone. The southerly area here that I'm outlining with my pointer is another 15 acres in the area that we are planning to develop the street facility on. The northerly area, as the council's been aware, we've discussed off and on for well over a year now since we bought this property. We entered into a design contract in September of 2021 with JLG to do some siting of our new street facility. This property was landed on as the most opportune location and land availability for that street facility. So then subsequent to that, in April of 2022, we entered into a full design contract with JLG for the street facility. And then in those discussions, this little piece of property right here also came into play even prior to our initial contract with JLG. The developer that buys and develops real estate for Dollar General stores approached the city with interest in buying land up here in trade for the Stockman's Cafe parcel. And those discussions ensued for several months as we kind of pieced together our plan for our street facility and the known excess land that we would want to develop for commercial purposes to the north. The council recently entered into and approved an agreement with that land developer for the Dollar General Company to do a land swap for the Stockman's Cafe for a parcel to the north that's of equivalent value with all things considered in that equation. The demo of the cafe, the installation of some of the work and the land values to the north, and then also, of course, there's utility involvement and street involvement and improvements like that need to be made. With that, the next step in the process was to bring forward the rezone from this I-1 zone to a C3 Highway Commercial District. That was brought forward to the Planning Commission at their last meeting here a week and a half ago. And similar discussion of sharing some of the intent behind the excess 12 acres here that exist and how we wanted to develop them, sell them off in a commercial nature. That action at the Planning Commission level did not pass. They voted that down. It did not recommend approval to this board by a vote of 4-2. And the main, I would say, maybe sole reason for the denial of that rezone was the discussion of the potential or the likelihood of a 10th Avenue extension westerly into our property. That 10th Avenue extension has also for several months been on the table with initial renditions of the street facility that dated back to that April timeline that I just went through, April of 2022. They've been vetted as early as June or July of 2022 with the DOT. We have email correspondence with them dating that far back on exploring that option, knowing that they have the ultimate jurisdiction over any access onto Highway 20. So we wanted to make sure we had our ducks in a row with their potential approval of that. We did not receive any negative comments back from them There were a few minor details that they wanted us to address along the way, as we expected. And 10th Avenue was otherwise a go from a city engineering standpoint and the DOT traffic and access engineering standpoint. However, the Planning Commission did use that as their sole, if there were other reasons they weren't cited as clearly, but one of the sole purposes for their denial was that 10th Avenue extension. Since that meeting, we do have the final approval from the DOT in hand. We've got the letter, the permit from them to construct a 10th Avenue extension. They also gave us the one up front if we want it later. We haven't finalized this, but also a potential 9th Avenue extension into our site as well. They've checked both of those off. There are a couple caveats in there, like I mentioned, that I think benefit this discussion. Well, I'll preface that comment that first, I don't think that infrastructure improvements are necessarily an appropriate means to approve or deny a rezone. I would like to, again, focus our attention back to the use of this land once that decision is taken action on the 20th. But I know that for context and for information purposes, we can share and talk about infrastructure improvements, and so that's why I'm sharing all this additional information. In the DOT's approval, which is attached to the agenda item tonight, they did cite several single locations that I'll pull up here that are currently single access points along Highway 20 that I think are important to point out. These, I think there were 4 of them to be removed, and then the intent was to channel all the access to this northerly area to that 10th Avenue extension, which made sense, again, from the city engineering standpoint. We feel that that one point of access is much safer than having what would otherwise be 3 or 4 individual points of access onto that highway. And the DOT agrees with that. And so it's a small effort to close these individual accesses off with some curb and gutter. I believe there's curb cuts there now that otherwise allow for those points of access that we would have to eliminate. That's the background on 10th Avenue. That's the background on the rezone. But again, if I go back to my comments from a minute ago, really the action before the board is a rezone. Is this land appropriately being placed into use by rezoning it to the C3 Highway Commercial District? And of course, one of the things we look to when making those decisions as a community is our comprehensive land use plan. The answer that document shows us is yes, absolutely. This is referenced in several different maps in our comp plan that is highway commercial use is appropriate for this area. And with that, that's my summary here on first reading, and I'd stand by for any comments or questions.
Thank you very much. Since this is a first reading, no official motion is required. Also, there is no need for a public hearing. However, it has always been my custom as mayor to allow public comments upon anything that is on a council agenda. So is there anyone who would like to testify on this item? Hearing no one come forward, I will open it up for council discussion and questions. Councilman Tupper.
Mr. Von Eyck, can you bring your map back up where you're going to cut the curb cuts out?
Certainly. I'm going to rotate it here.
So we know the other, is that where the yellow marks are?
Some of these are accesses to be eliminated. Other ones they just identified, like this is the new 10th Avenue North, where that would be located. Then the south one here is what a new 9th Avenue North location would look like. Otherwise, there's an access roughly in front of the Stockman's Cafe that would be eliminated, which is okay because the footprint of our new street facility building is kind of in that general vicinity as well.
So just south of there, not to interrupt, but just south of there is a couple businesses. Where would they enter? Would that be in the 9th Avenue?
Yeah, this access would remain. And if 9th is extended or built, it would be the same point of access that currently exists today.
So either way, they'd have access to those businesses.
Correct, either as is today or with a 9th Avenue extension.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. This question got brought up at the forum the other night, and I've had some feedback on this. I do support this rezone, which goes against some of my comments about the Plan Commission in the previously in the past year. And I want to clarify that as to why I support this rezone. And that's strictly because I think that they used a reason to not allow a rezone outside their purview. And I'm saying that is because they used the 10th Avenue extension as their main talking point to decide not to recommend this for approval. And if 10th Avenue was out of the discussion and it was just purely a rezone request, not based on access of 10th Avenue, I think that this would have gone through. And that's why I support this. And I still respect their opinion a lot. I've talked with a few of them about this. And, I've talked on both sides too. I've had plan commissioners that have supported it and also that voted against it. And I just wanted to clarify why I would support this rezone.
Thank you. Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Just a few questions, make sure I understand a few aspects of this. Public Works Director Von Eye, the 4 access points that would be eliminated, are those frequently used? Is there quite a bit of usage of those access points that would be eliminated?
No, I'd say they're rarely used, with exception to the one that's near the Stockman's Cafe. That one was probably recently more heavily used till the cafe closed. But those 3 northerly ones, I would say, are rarely used. The city's not utilizing them for anything at this point.
Okay.
And whether the stockyards were using them in the way past, that very well could be, but nothing recently.
If this were not rezoned, stays at I-1, the issue wouldn't even be coming before the Planning Commission or the Council relative to, traffic in this area. Is that a fair statement? As long as it's a permitted use in an I-1 area?
With the exception to the plat, yes, it's a fair statement, but a plat still needs to be presented, which actually will be coming before the Planning Commission later this week and in front of the Council on the 20th as well.
Okay. Continue? I know at the Planning Commission, there was a comment made by the gentleman that owns, I think it was Arrow Truck Lines, in the rear part of that, concerns about access to his property. Can you address that? I wasn't quite sure I understood his concern, but could you address that, Heath?
Yes. So Arrow Trucking, which is on the south end of this map here, it's kind of hard to see. It's off the screen. They also own a parcel of land to the northwest up here. And that parcel of land is kind of an L shape that surrounds Doc Howard's land. And the long skinny part of that L heads up and connects to Highway 20. So it is not a landlocked parcel. It does have adjacency to Highway 20. However, in the years past, they've used this stockyard land as a cut across to get from this lot over to the southeast corner of their other property. So that was what was questioned at the Planning Commission meeting, is whether they'd be able to continue that practice or not. Of course, those are things we'd talk about offline with them to try to figure out, the best access to their property. We'd want to be careful committing to allowing a perpetual access easement to and through our new street facility site. So I did express that at the Planning Commission meeting as well. I'm confident that no access easement exists for them to be utilizing that in perpetuity at this point in time. So there's a couple different options we talked about. One, their connectivity with Highway 20, and because it's otherwise a landlocked parcel except for that Highway 20 access, they would have to work with the DOT, and I would be led to assume that the DOT would find that favorable because that parcel could otherwise not have any access. The other possibility was dependent on the length of the 10th Avenue extension. If 10th Avenue extends clear to the west, it actually abuts that other parcel of theirs. I'll pull that up here quick. zoom in. So right here where our parcel takes a 90-degree turn, this is that other land of theirs. So if 10th Avenue were extended the whole way, they would also have street access through that. But this is the L shape I was referring to that has connectivity to Highway 20. I have not looked at this personally to see if there's actually any form of an access onto Highway 20. But if one does not exist, that would be a solution as well.
Thank you. I realize we're probably not comparing apples to apples. This would be the third establishment of this nature in the community. Do we have any kind of sense of traffic counts at the other two? What kind of traffic this would entail? Or is that something that we could do a swag on that get some idea?
Yeah, I don't have any traffic generation numbers off the top of my head. I know that Justin's been in communication with the DOT engineers. They know what our first two anticipated uses are. They got some staffing counts and equipment counts from us on what the traffic generation from our street facility might look like, and then also for that commercial use in relation to that land trade. Based on those two preliminary numbers, that did not trigger a traffic impact assessment with the DOT. It would take something of quite a bit more stature and traffic generation than those two uses to require that.
Just a couple more questions. I had reached out to Manager Mack and comments were made at the Planning Commission and subsequently addressed to me directly about that being a dangerous intersection in and of itself, or that area in general. And I had asked Manager Mack if we have statistics either from our own police department or the DOT as far as accidents in that area in recent years. And I understand that is in the works or is being compiled.
Yes. If you like, Mayor, that could be a little bit more detailed, lengthy discussion here, but I do have some documents I could share.
It's a first reading, time to vet this.
Let me pull those up quick. If you could play some Jeopardy music or something while I'm looking for the...
Is there any question not for Director Von Eye?
I've got one more, but it's still probably direct.
Okay. Well, then we will wait and stare awkwardly at you, Heath.
And again, as a first reading, this is something that we could take a look at prior to the second reading, rather than taking Director Von Eye's time tonight.
I've got the document here. The document I'm pulling up is our recent Transportation Master Plan. And in that plan that we just performed here in 2019, 2020, that was carried out and finalized, it was an update from our otherwise aged 2005 Transportation Master Plan. And in there, they look at the traffic safety of intersections throughout our community. And this intersection is on that list. However, what I want to highlight is that it's way down that list as far as traffic safety concerns. So on this table, we can see the Watertown intersection crash rate rankings. This is for a 4 to 5 year time span. I don't know if 15 or 19 are included in this window, so it's a 4 to 5 year time span that they looked at with crash data. You'll see the number one intersection with the most crashes is US 212 and Willow Creek Drive. Oh, excuse me, I got the wrong. That should have been 212 and 81. Let me pull up the, here it goes. This is the, based on the frequency, the crash frequencies. So the highest ranking of the intersection in town with the most crashes would be US 212 and Highway 81, which would stand to reason. That's the one that sees the most traffic in town. You'll scroll way down this list of the top 20 intersections that were identified in the study, and South Dakota Highway 20 and 10th Avenue Northwest is third from last on this list, with only 10 crashes within that time window, that 5 year window. You'll note also they have ratings over here that don't mean a lot to most people, but they quantify it in a crashes per million vehicles entering the intersection, and that's what this decimal on the far right side is. We have about 9,500 vehicles through this intersection a day. That's the daily entering volume that they refer to that as. So if you quantify that, 9,500 a day over a 5-year period, and only 10 crashes occurred, this by no means is triggering a huge traffic safety concern for that intersection. You know, if westerly 10th Avenue extension were to be performed, and if the subsequent land that's not developed already brings in some type of a business or industry that has a high level of traffic generation, obviously this discussion changes, and the traffic control measures at this intersection would be considered. You know, does it trigger a traffic signal light or not? Does it trigger any modifications to the speed limits through this area? Does it trigger modifying how those speeds are reduced as you come into this area from the northwest part of town? All those things would be considered at that point in time, and are also spelled out, I believe, in detail, if not on the permit, in the emails we've received from the DOT. Those are the exact things they'll be checking on with us in the future as well.
Okay. Could this information be included with the agenda packet for the next meeting?
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
And then just to follow, just the one last question, you've probably already touched on it, but let's say that regardless of the decision on the rezone here, let's say it stays as is, or let's say it does get changed, and at some point it does trigger a need for some safety mitigation, whether it's a traffic light or slowing speed down. Does the DOT make that decision, or it's solely their decision to make?
Yeah, they ultimately make the decisions on those kind of traffic control measures within their state highway routes.
Okay. And then let's say the cost of a street light, for example, who bears that cost?
That would be our cost based on the development that we help generate to trigger that need.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Shetty.
Thank you, Mayor. I was debating to ask this or not ask this, but I guess I will. We're having fun already, right? So, there's been many different changes in the vision of this land as far as, from City Hall and combining some services to not. And just for the sake of peace of mind for me, just a question for me would be is combining operational side of things. Is this land that we're talking about that we're talking on the zoning here, is that not big enough to utilize a chunk of that for overflow of combining the operational side for for the Parks and Rec Forestry? If you ever want to down the road, I'm thinking visionary down the road, just to make sure that if we have this land now, is there any possibility it could be used for that, or it just doesn't fit the shape, the size of it? That's just my thought, I guess I have. That's what I'm thinking on, and just wanted to see if anybody had input on that future visionary of, if we ever needed the land for operational side instead of selling it off for commercial highway.
Yeah, those considerations have been given in our discussions, and where we've landed on that is that even if some additional space in this area were needed, it could be utilized even with the C3 zoning. We've checked that off as far as the permitted uses in the C3, and feel like that would not be an issue. Some of our stockpiling, things like that, is where it gets a little stickier, but there's still avenues in the C3 zoning where stockpiling can occur. But we've got enough room on that southerly 15 acres that we feel that, that stockpiling function could be easily carried out there. As far as office and administration buildings or things like that, our street facilities being designed for expandability in the future, along with the heated storage area. Neither of those expandable footprints would carry into this area. They'd be utilizing that 15 acres as well. So I'd point that out as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Danforth.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I've got a number of just questions or comments, if I can just brush through them if I can. Heath, if independent of this rezoning, which was associated to the land swap, okay, we've talked about 10th Avenue, whether it's an extension or whether it's an access, ingress, egress point for the street department from day one that we've after we bought that land with some idea of putting the street department there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Right. So even if we don't do the rezone, which I agree with Colin, that the issue is it the right use? And I know we got these other things that we have to contend with, but the issue is the use, and it is an appropriate use, in my opinion. But if we didn't do that, we'd be having an access point anyway there with the street department, whether it be equipment, trucks, or employees. Is that fair to say?
Yes, according to the design path that we've been on for quite a few months now,
Right.
12 months.
And we've used that extension as a means of future commercial or retail development, with that road going back and eventually on the westward side becoming like a service road for access to those businesses that would be along Highway 20, correct?
Correct.
So they would not each have their own access point. Is
Yeah,
that fair?
that's absolutely true.
In our agreement with the land swap, did we guarantee that, I don't know, I don't recall the name of the developer, but did we guarantee them rezoning?
We did.
We guaranteed it?
As
Or
part
it
of
was, or the swap was conditional on rezoning?
The swap was conditional upon the rezone. However, they also have the remedy of suing us for specific performance, because they are basically purchasing land to then swap. So they're relying on our assurances that this would be done. So they have the remedy of suing us for specific performance.
So it's odd that we go through this process then, if we were gonna, I mean, at that point, why take it to the plan commission? If it's guaranteed, and that's a comment, that seemed odd to me, but in general, number one, I do understand where a lot of the individuals have come from with concerns on this intersection. I understand it, and personally, I was surprised that the DOT has kind of said, looks good. I really am, but again, I'll go back to it, I said earlier, I'm not an engineer. I think it would be good for us to, especially as a council and such, the plan that ultimately gets put in place there, because I think we have to look at the logic of 9th, look at 10th and what that's intent is, and then look at, I think it's 11th Street that is being proposed to be completed. I think we need to take, as a group, we've got to take a look at that and have our 2 cents in on that before we get to the 11th or 12th hour of that planning, so that we can share our thoughts and concerns with that. Let's see here. I think that is probably it. But again, I'll go back to it and with what Mr. Paulson has said, it's a use issue. Is it an appropriate use for the land? And that's what we've talked about. Now, whether we got issues with the plating or whatever it is in roads, we'll deal with that at some point. But the function of this request, or the intent of this request, is it the proper use? And I think it is. So,
Any further questions or comments? Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, I'm looking at Attorney Carrico, since it was voted down with the Planning Commission, it takes a supermajority on our part, or 5 of us, to approve this, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Close that item B. Move on to item C, a first reading of an ordinance amendment on the use of revenue of Title 16 sales, service, and use tax. We'll go to our city manager, Amanda Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. As promised out of the work session a couple weeks ago, this is the draft ordinance revision related to our second penny sales tax, the 212 fund. So the language change that we are proposing states the city council by resolution during the budget appropriation process may authorize a one-time annual transfer from the capital improvement fund to the general fund to provide additional needed revenue for the municipality of Watertown. You may remember during our discussion, we currently do not have the flexibility to take capital improvement funds and move them to the general fund. This would allow that flexibility. It would require an additional approval by the council on top of the budget appropriation for that to become a reality. And with that, I would stand by for questions.
Thank you. This is a first reading, so no motion is needed. We'll open it up for council discussion or questions. Councilman Villauer?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question. It says by resolution during the budget appropriation process, and that is when? Is that October, November? I'm sorry, when?
November. So we would present the budget with a recommendation to either use funds or not from the 212.
Okay.
And prior to approving the budget, you would approve the appropriation.
Is that timing appropriate? I mean, will we know at that point? I guess it's based upon what the budget looks like at that time. I understand that. But I'm just questioning, will we have a good feel at that point whether or not there would be that need?
Yeah, we would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councilman Danforth?
Thank you, Mayor. I've got probably 6, 7 items. First of all, for years I have suggested that we take a look at this because I do believe there is a need. I believe it provides flexibility, and in general, I support the direction that we're going here. But I think what I would probably do, Mayor, is instead of going through them now, is I'll email them to you so that you can look at them, and then at the second reading, then maybe go through some of that stuff if we would, because there's some clarification questions and such. The biggest concern that I have is, and again, like I said, I'm all for this and have been for years, is that it could get abused, and that is my biggest concern. And so I guess one of my questions right now is, I've read the ordinance language, proposed ordinance language. Is it uncommon, or would it be uncommon for us to put guidelines for use in there? Now, because as we are going to all come and go over time, staff's going to come and go, I think this one is really, really important for those that are sitting in this room in someday in the future, understand where we're coming from, what our intent is, and how in general to use. It's not going to lock anything in, but it does tell the rhyme and reason and logic as to what we're doing and how we think it should be used. Because I do think there is opportunity for and I'm going to say abuse, and I'm just saying that not purposely, but it's kind of like having that little cookie jar there that you can just go grab, and we got to be careful of that. So I'm going to send, I'll send an email out on that and with mine, and we'll address them at the next meeting then, if we're good.
Thank you. City Manager?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. My gut reaction to that is, yes, there should be some policy that gives guardrails, but I would not put that policy in the ordinance. It would be an internal operating policy that, similar to the policy we're going to talk about here in a little while with subsidies. We've talked about other. We approved the procurement policy. It would be internal to the body at the time, and if future bodies wanted to change it, that would be up to them. That'd be my gut reaction to that, but I'll wait your questions and we could talk through it.
Follow up, Councilman?
If we go that direction, then what I would like to see is, I would like to see the draft policy coincide with the ordinance, so that we know that, because one or the other, without them looking and seeing how it's actually going to work together, can be a little troubling if we don't see here's the ordinance, but here's the policy how that's going to govern our use. So if we're going to go that way, then I would like to see both of them come together for evaluation.
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. Similar concern as Councilman Danforth here. The beauty of looking this over after the last work session and thinking about it some more. I just have a couple questions potentially for Ms. Bobzien. The potential benefits for the general fund, is there even a way to give an example? Let's say if we look back, let's say if this was in place in the last 5 years. Any examples of what kind of dollar amount theoretically could have been transferred over in a policy like this?
I don't know if I can think of a dollar amount. So the one thing that when you think of about the general fund, it truly is the operating fund of your city. So it's supporting your personnel and the basic operations. The one thing that the general fund also has to support is a lot of equipment purchases over the years. And that's been one thing that's always kind of been held back is we've needed street equipment and police cars and all those, and the general fund has had to support that, and a lot of times those have been kind of nixed throughout that process because they're big dollars. So as far as coming up with a number, I don't know if I can come up with a number, but that's always been one pressure that's been on the general fund. And I think as we were talking about starting to kind of change how we're operating our second penny, those are some of the things that we really do need to probably support.
So that would be, I think they may follow up with that.
I think City Manager Mack has something she would like to add on to that.
Just anecdotally, in the last budget process, we cut $1 million out of general fund requests specifically for equipment. So there's a big round number to think about.
Councilman Shetty?
Yeah, thank you. And that helps. Just what would be the usage? That may help in the discussions as Councilman Danforth is talking about, as far as I could see the potential down the road of when we're all not here and it's none of us, somebody else misusing it. Because no, of course we won't.
One other example, not this current budget year, but the previous budget year, we did some work on wages to address compression. And so all of those dollars came out of the general fund. If we'd had the flexibility and the 212 fund supported it, the compression dollar amount, which I can't remember, I think it was about $600,000, we could have supplemented for the compression, right? So wages and benefits are covered out of the general fund, but that was above and beyond wages and benefits that we normally pay. So that could be another potential use for those dollars.
And you had to continue there. So just thinking down the road is this year, for example, we needed to add another $1 million to some more streets to be constructed. That was kind of hindsight into this year's budget. This has the potential to affect that down the road, where let's say if we take this money out and 5 years from now we're $4 million lower in the capital improvement fund. Well, now we don't have the money for streets improvement, because if I look at it, just maybe this is too simple-minded, but I'm looking at this as, again, there's different points of view, but if we have these so-called extra funds that we can transfer over, well, I know that for the streets we're redoing this year, we've got 10 more streets just like it that could be done this year. So if that really is extra money to transfer over, we could do more streets and get our streets in a better place, or whatever other capital improvements we need to do. I kind of look at it as at home, having a home budget and putting money aside for a furnace, knowing the furnace is going to go out. But then at some point I start taking some money out of that furnace fund. I still put money in every year, but I always chisel some out of there. And all of a sudden when the furnace does go out, ooh, I got to get a home improvement loan. Would that be like, would this also be like, oh, we got to get a bond now 5-10 years from now because we use this money for other things in the general fund? I'm just, again, looking at a big picture. This is possible that this could play out this way. So that's why I'm just trying to think out loud, I guess, and see if there's any value in this thought process as we work through this together.
Well, I think it's a very valuable thought process, and it certainly could play out that way if you didn't have guardrails in place, not even the policy like Councilman Danforth was talking about, but we do have internal controls that the finance office has put in place on balances in those accounts that we adhere to from a level of comfortability. Is that how you say that word? So I would hope that with all of those things in play, you wouldn't be pitting one fund against the other. What you see, so this language is very similar to other communities. You do see in some others where they say, not just annually, but forever, 25% of the, second penny goes directly into the general fund. I'm not recommending that. I don't think we're ready for that. This also requires us, as we've been working for the last 2 years and as we get the model built, to be really intentional about planning both on the capital side and the operational side. I think there'll be some good balances there, but we all might not be sitting in this room 5 years from now, and who knows what future managers and mayors and councils will want to do with those dollars. But that's what, you all are elected to decide, so.
Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'm glad you touched on a flat percentage. I am not at all in favor of that. And I think I agree also with Councilman Danforth that, putting some guardrails or guidelines in place to help this is definitely prudent. But just a comment to make, I think as we looked at the recent big projects, I'm looking at Finance Officer Bob Zine, those charts that we looked at many, many times as we were looking at the ice arena, as we're looking at the street facility, still ongoing, City Hall discussion. I remember very vividly that, yes, we're pushing the limits there, but also as a few years go by, those obligations are going to start to drop off. Will they be replaced by something else? Potentially, yes. But we know on the general fund side, those demands are going to continue to increase. We know good and well we're going to have to replace patrol cars. We know good and well wages are going to continue to go up, and that's going to be a significant factor every year. So this does give us some flexibility to help balance what the needs from the general fund with potentially the excess dollars out of the second penny. So I think this is a good plan.
Finance Officer Bob Zine.
The only thing that I will add, I think the flexibility is important for the council to have. There will be years when the Capital Improvement Fund could have received a lot of federal grants or state grants, and some of those projects are covered by the grant funding, but then there are capital equipment purchases within the general fund that we really do find important. So I think the flexibility to do that is important. We also have to remember our general fund also supports our Park and Rec fund. So sometimes too, there's other purchases that are happening in Park and Rec from the general fund that kind of maybe do teeter on that line of capital improvement as well. So I think the flexibility, I also agree with the parameters being set up so that it's just not what you need that year, but it's really a thought out process. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Close the hearing on that first reading and move on to item D, a first reading of another ordinance amendment on a special alcoholic beverage license. City Attorney Carrico.
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, Council, when we had our special meeting in granting some special event licenses for Thursday Night Live at Foundation Plaza, which I understand went very well, and I'm glad to hear it. I was unable to make it. We made some revisions to the alcoholic beverage ordinance to accommodate this Thursday Night Live type concept of these weekly consecutive seasonal events, and as well as addressing the limits that are under our standard special event license. So when you think of this, I would think of it more as each Thursday Night Live is a piece of a longer event. So in other words, a vendor does not necessarily need to do all of them, because then it would fall outside the 15-day parameter that is in the state statute. This is more, they can pick and choose which ones that they would like to do, and they're considered as individual events of a collective whole. So, that being said, I also tried to minimize the amount of revisions necessary to not really, for lack of a better phrase, jack up the ordinance and make it more complicated. So, Section 4 was the first change, which has to do with the annual limit, and that it shall not include our weekly seasonal events. So that's what I'm calling it. Rather than Thursday Night Live, and that is because we were looking projectively into the future. There could be other, seasonal events, whether they're at City Park or, somewhere else within the city. With the fees, if you remember, Council, when we were talking about the cannabis ordinance in work session, we talked about setting fees in a fee schedule rather than setting them in the ordinance so that we didn't have to change the ordinance every time we wanted to change the fee. So this one was actually have been done anyway, which is to put the fee as established by resolution of the city council. This would be an annual when you guys go to adopt fees for the following year. And then section 9 would be the actual weekly seasonal events and what that means. On this one, it is one night at least during a week of at least 4 consecutive weeks. And the reason for that is because, again, we have this 15-day limitation. So right now, you have a vendor who has applied under our old special event or current special event license. They have a 15-day window, and there's 3 Thursday Night Lives that fall within that event. So in order to define what a weekly seasonal event is, we took an additional one, which would fall outside that license period. So it's 4 to 12. I did cap it at 12, kind of accommodates the summer event cycle, keeps it seasonal, and also detours any year-round where you have a vendor trying to basically run an additional operation over a yearly period where it's, oh, but I'm having a special event. So that was kind of what that was about. But again, I'm open to any revisions or suggestions of council. And if that was confusing, I'm happy to clarify a little more. Because some of you were looking at me a little funny. Because again, we do want it to be user-friendly. So with that, I will pass it off back to you, Mayor.
This is the first reading, so no official motion, but open it up for questions and comments. Councilman Danforth?
Ms. Carrico, I got a question. And it really isn't about it's about the special licenses.
Okay.
And this wouldn't be uncommon, that I could have an establishment and I could have 2 or more different types of licenses, correct?
Yes, I don't know, they are limited, but yes, you can have multiple different ones, yes.
So when we talk about that, the special licenses and the 4 per year, is it 4 per year per business entity, or is it per license?
Yes, thank you. So my finance officer is helping me here, per license.
Per license. So if I have 2 or 3 licenses, which I could, then I could have 12 events.
Correct. So normally, they might have a beer and wine and a liquor. So in other words, keep in mind that if they had one that was just beer and wine, then that's all they can do. They can't switch over. They can't use a beer and wine license, apply for a special event license, and sell liquor unless they were using their liquor license.
So what they're going to sell is tagged to the license itself as to what can be sold?
Correct.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments? Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Might be worth just mentioning, as I understand it, we made a couple changes to the agenda before we kicked off the meeting. Those items that we removed were related to what we're talking about right now.
Correct, and I'll explain a little on that. Just so you know, the fees that are going to be proposed at the next council meeting would be $50 for sake of discussion, that individual event. So each Thursday Night Live would be $50. And those previous licenses that you guys approved, they would then get a credit of $150 because they've only used 3 Thursday Night Lives, so they'd have 3 more coming to them. And the reason we pulled the resolution was because this was a first reading. So you haven't adopted it yet, so you can't approve the fee for something that doesn't exist yet.
The reason I raised the issue is that one of the applicants is specifically named. This removing it from the agenda does not reflect negatively on that establishment. But I just want to make that point clear.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That was just an individual choice. They decided to pull it.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? All right, we'll go to item F, an appropriation and subsidy policy and guidelines discussion. City Manager Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. We did discuss this at the work session a couple of weeks ago. What you have in front of you is a policy that establishes guidelines and criteria regarding the allocation and use of municipal subsidies within the City of Watertown. These guidelines shall be used in processing and reviewing applications requesting municipal subsidy assistance. We believe that protecting the financial interest of the City of Watertown is of the utmost importance. So it's the intent to provide a minimum amount of municipal subsidies as well as other incentives that the city may deem appropriate for the shortest term required for the project to proceed. What you have in front of you is the language as well as the draft application. There are a couple of tweaks to the application we're still needing to make, but we would get this upon approval of this policy. We would get the application out to those that have applied for funding in the past, and we would also advertise and have those due back to myself and Kristen by July 1st. I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you very much. Chair will first entertain a motion to approve the guidelines. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Danforth. Now back to you, Councilman Tupper.
Have we decided yet, or this is for Manager Mack, have we decided yet how we're going to, once we get the applications in, how we're going to process them?
So Kristen and I will review them first to make sure that they meet the criteria. If they do, then we would bring them to you all for a discussion during the budget process. At that time, so I got to think through this procedurally. We'd get them out to you ahead of time so you can review them. You can tell us what groups you want to have come in and talk to you, and we'll schedule it that they're here during the budget process whenever we have that particular meeting for subsidies.
Yep. Thank you.
Any further comments? Councilman Danforth.
I got some questions. It is, because it's, just going through a couple of the items in there. We reference that we have the opportunity as a governing body here to afford up to 4% of the budget, correct? General fund budget. In terms of dollars today, what is that? What 4% of what today if this was in place?
I'm going to let Kristen do the math.
Kristen, you can't do this in your head.
It's a lot. About 700,000.
700,000. Okay. I think that number personally is too high, because I think, in my opinion, it gives, again, I'm looking at whoever is sitting on this side of the table, if you've got it and we've got guidelines that say we can go up to that, do we go there? Is it easier to go there? And it might be. I think we have to be careful when we're taxing people and then giving it away. Long time believer that, and I understand the whole long list of possibilities here, but I believe that our first priority should be those that are basically providing a service to our current departments and are literally kind of a quasi type of department or support. Are there any limitations on this? I didn't see anything in here. They could use these dollars, if approved, for anything. Could be CapEx, could be some operating expenses. Is that correct? So we aren't defining what it can be used for. We're saying as long as it's within their budget somewhere, we'll consider it. Is that true?
I'm trying to find the language here. There are some limitations on operations, but we did not exclude operations because there may be a compelling reason to contribute towards operations. So the goal is to shift from operational requests to project-specific or capital one-time requests. Now, we do have some entities that we fund that, like you said, are more of an extension of what we do. And those dollars, well, one of them specifically does not come out of the general fund. They're funded out of a couple of our enterprise funds. But those do largely go to operations, some of those organizations. So, you know, we try to limit it. Some of it's based on the application itself and, you know, talk about how the funds are going to be used. It's a, you know, it's a one-time shot in the arm because we had X happen. We want to do this great mural on the side of a building and it's going to cost us $10,000. Whatever the application might be. What we're trying to avoid is, well, we've always given, therefore we're going to keep giving. And there are organizations that probably are only surviving because they're getting a city subsidy, and it's probably worth a conversation if that is a continued good use of city funding. The Volunteer Center, for example, and they're a great organization, but they on their own decided that we've outlived our usefulness at this time. But the city was contributing pretty significantly to their operation, City and United Way. So that's the point of this, is to help really guide these organizations to be less operationally dependent for the city. As it relates to the 4%, yeah, I mean, $700,000 is a lot of money. But you may have, in previous communities, we've called these WOW projects. I mean, you may have an organization that, now we have a splash pad downtown, but I'm going to use that as an example, who want to build a splash pad in a neighborhood, and they've got half the money. Well, hey, if we've got the ability to give up to X for that, and you all deem it's an appropriate use of those funds, then we have the ability to do it. But putting a cap on it also then prevents us from just, you know, we all aren't going to be here, you know, 30 years from now, really prevents future bodies from just spending however, you know, they deem appropriate. So I kind of muddled through that, sorry.
Follow up, Councilman?
Yep. Now, we do not, at least, again, I scanned through it, we do not require them to be a nonprofit or have certification of such, correct?
Correct.
Should we? Seems like we should.
Well, I think, gosh, I have to think. Tim, are you a C3? Yeah. Yeah, so that might be.
Which is still a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Right. The 503C, you know.
Well, I do think that there is language in here. I'm sorry, I don't have it right in front. I'm trying to skim through this. About for-profit.
Well,
Let me find
if
it.
it's not in there, we should at least have that discussion, because that goes down to the next one that I really question. It says here that, and I got my notes here, so it's not exactly as written, but it says requests by individuals, religious or political based, outside of the city will not be considered. When I read that, my first thought was, why are we considering this for individuals, religious or political at all? Because that's a slippery slope. That's where, to me, it goes back to nonprofits, and I'm not sure this body, in certain aspects, for religious purposes or political purposes, should ever even consider using taxpayer dollars. Now, I'm going to put a caveat to that. The Salvation Army, it's a religious organization, but their intent of what they do is, yeah, it's religious based, but you know, let's say it's food, right? You know, so I could see that little caveat there, but I think we at least need to consider the 503C requirement, and I think we got to look at that whole scenario of any individual religion, religious or political. There's a project and it's an individual, then they should somehow get tagged with somebody that has a 503C that can be ran through and supported in that manner or something. So, food for thought.
So, not answering that specific question, but back to the other one regarding operations versus capital. So there is language in here. A key factor will be the applicant's ability to provide a service or outcome that improves the quality of life. The applicant must also provide a but-for analysis, which demonstrates the need for public assistance. Other factors include the applicant's ability to become self-sustaining, the duration of the funding commitment, and operating versus capital requests. So we do put in the policy that those are all factors that the council will consider, staff will consider when making a recommendation, and then council will consider when determining who to give to and in what amount.
Councilman Shetty.
Well, actually, Amanda took my point there, because as I read through that, the but-for clause should be a way to process it, look at it, and determine, especially on projects, it'd be kind of hard on a operational side of things, unless it solely is funded by the city. But it'd be tough to just yearly supplement some organization for their operational cost in the but-for clause. I could see it for a project, but again, there could be some out there, but that at least will help us have conversations and hopefully make wise decisions when we work through it.
City Manager.
Krista, correct me if I'm wrong, but the three big organizations that we fund, so the WDC, the Chamber, and the CVB. So the Chamber and the CVB are funded out of the Triple B fund. This policy relates directly to the general fund, so those contributions would be considered separately of these ones. And then the WDC is funded out of wastewater and solid waste, correct? So again, when we have the conversations about those three entities, they're separate of the organizations that typically would apply for a municipal subsidy. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to get bogged down and start digging into the weeds too much into the revenue code, but I do want to make a point that Councilman Danforth was specifically referencing 501c3 organizations, which is the non-profitable charitable organizations. There's a whole litany, about 20 different 501c organizations that in and of themselves can have merit. So I don't want to see us restrict this to just the 501c3s. So like I said, we're getting bogged down in the weeds of the Internal Revenue Code, but I just want to make that point. Now, just a comment. I made the comment last time we looked at this a couple of weeks ago that I don't want to be a cynic here, but you know, we put all these policies in place, and we have tried so many different things relative to these organizations. I've worked through 3 administrations now. I got a sense that nothing is. Hopefully, I'm wrong, but I got a sense that nothing is changing. I support this. Don't get me wrong, but I just sense from a practical standpoint, nothing is really going to change.
Well, aren't you a ray of sunshine?
I thought that was Kristen's job to be realistic. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. On that same note, I really do hope things change because, I mean, I've talked about this several times, and holding people accountable is really important. And I think in the past we've kind of blindly just continually defund certain groups that aren't giving us a benefit or haven't displayed the benefit or displayed that they're following through with the vision of the council and the community. And I think we've seen continually bad decisions over and over from some different groups here and there, not just recently, but in the past. And I think it just, I mentioned this before, but the budget hearing process states that they may or may not be invited to. And when our tax dollars are involved, this is everyone's money that people are paying to. And I think it's really important to hold whoever is receiving those tax dollars accountable. And I'm glad we're doing something like this, but that's why, Councilman Vilhauer, I really hope things change, because I think holding them accountable every single year and accounting for those dollars and making sure that they're following through with their vision. Not only our vision, you know, a lot of these have boards, their board's vision, our community's vision, because that's the only way we're going to move forward and be a better community is if we're all following the same goal. And unfortunately, I don't think that's happened in the past, and that's why I wish that we could do more, but I think this is a good first step.
Councilman Tupper.
My question's for Ms. Bobzien. You know, you put a 4% limit on it, which is about $700,000. What have we spent in the last few years? Just off the top of your head, you know?
The budget for 23, I think, was about 470,000.
So
that's
it's
coming out of the general fund.
Okay. And it's been kind of.
I would say it's pretty consistent. I would say it's around that.
And that's one issue that I have is it's been pretty consistent. So that tells me, yeah, we just been given money because we got money last year. So I think this is a big plus that at least it's going to move forward with some of Colin's concerns, some of Mike's concerns. I know, Mike, you go back about 10 years ago when I first sat through my first budget hearing, and it just kind of like, we were not asking anybody other than just, here, send us a letter, say you want some money. And I know we discussed it back then that we need to have some kind of format to make them accountable. And so I think this is a good start, whether or not this will work every year. But at least we're starting to make people accountable instead of just, you know, we know we're going to get our city money next year. Yeah, because they always have. You know, when she says that's pretty standard across the board, that kind of tells you that that's what we did every year. These organizations are all great organizations, and they bring a lot of help to the community. And irregardless of which organization it is, they do have a service to the community, and they're all very important. Matter of fact, if you look at a lot of them, they're probably saving the community a lot of money. So just I would be real careful about asking them all to come in front of the full council, because as I say, I've sat through a lot of that stuff in the past through allocations. There's a lot of individual things that they would need to share that would be private. That's why I'm a strong advocate for either allowing the staff to do that or a committee to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Danforth?
One final question on this topic. Where does, in this process, where does our funding for the Boys and Girls Club come? Is that part of that 470, all of it, or is part of that potentially coming out of the general fund for our building obligation that we have? It's all on this, so that's part of that 470 that you referenced. Okay, thank you.
City Manager Mack?
I have a question too. So we give an annual contribution to the Boys and Girls Club, but then we also have obligations to our portion of the building that's separate of the money that we're talking about tonight, right?
Correct.
Okay, yep, that's what you're at, okay.
Right, any further questions or comments? I'll just say something. I know that these guidelines will not be perfect, but they are at least a step to make the organizations answer a basic question that the taxpayers would have, which is, what are you doing to deserve the taxpayer money? However, I would also say for the council that it could be a very good learning experience for us, because I see Mr. Sheehan back here, or CEO Sheehan, and in the conversations that I've had with him over the last month, he has said point blank that he would love to come in front of the entire council and say what the chamber does, because he feels that he would more than justify whatever money that the city is appropriating to him. And I know that the Watertown Development Company feels the same way, and I think that other organizations would love to have that opportunity as well. So this isn't necessarily a negative thing. This can be viewed as a positive thing on behalf of these organizations that we donate the money to give them an opportunity to toot their horn and tell what they do for the community. So this isn't necessarily a negative. It's just more informative for the community, and I think that that's, if that's how we look at it, then it's a positive all the way around. Any further questions or comments? Okay, Councilman Bueller, you never can let me have the last word.
Okay, nothing.
No, Councilman Bueller.
You're right about that, though. That's it. I'll have to let you have the next word. No, just a couple of things. I just want to, you've been here forever, you know, and I think this is a great step. This framework is something that we've lacked for a while. I don't think we've had any big problems with this. I've never seen that, you know, and I challenge Councilman Paulson to give me an example, because I would, if we have, I'd like to know what that was, if there were issues with this, negative issues with this in the past. You know, one of the things we kind of shifted our outlook a little bit on which of these things that we fund, and one of the big things was that we were looking at things, and I know, Mike, you kind of mentioned this, was the supplementing of other services through the community. You know, we can kind of look at these things and say, okay, these guys are going to help on the mental health side, these guys are going to help with law enforcement issues. You know, a lot of those different things, I think, were, because we sort of did, when I first looked at this, when I was first on one of those committees, it was kind of willy-nilly, you know, some of these things. And we had people that didn't bring budgets. We had people that had all kinds of money and unrestricted funds. And you know, so now that we're looking at budgets and I don't know, I just don't think we have to track every dime and make them report back to us. And I almost think that we may want to consider this, and that is, this is the way I understand this is a one-time a year type of thing, correct? Just give some thought to the potential or the possibility of doing this twice a year, because certain things can come up in a 6-month period where people might need assistance. And I know that that's probably not you know, that's something you would have to deal with, more work for you, but I just get a little food for thought in that regard. But I think this has been great, and I think just good common sense. And we have to keep in the back of our mind, what would the taxpayers want us to do with their money? You know, for their race, creed, color, whatever that person comes from, you know, we have to respect that in how we distribute the funds that we raise through those people. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any further questions or comments? All right, the motion is to approve the guidelines. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Final item is item H, an approval of a change order on pavement rehabilitation, crack sealing, and seal coating project number 2306. Public Works Director Heath Van Eye.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is what I'd call more of a routine change order. We did put it on the regular agenda, however, because I wanted to highlight some of the streets that were recently worked on. This project, we were able to get bid out and awarded, and the work is already complete. So this is the final change order. It's for our annual crack sealing and seal coating that we do throughout town. You'll see on this list here there are a dozen streets that we were able to partially treat with the crack seal and seal coating, along with some other various locations on some of our pathways and also at the airport on some of the taxiways. There's also a map or a series of maps included in the agenda packet for the general public's knowledge on some of those areas out east of the lake and out southwest of town, and as I mentioned, some of the taxiways at the airport, central parts of town, 11th Street that leads up to the college, and portions of the trail that are adjacent to the trail we talked about earlier tonight that's going to be reconstructed. Portions of that trail were crack sealed under this project. But I just wanted to highlight about a dozen roads that had work done on them. The work's already complete, and we're going to be continuing to crank out more of that work with the upcoming mill and overlay and street reconstruction projects that are in the works. With that, I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you very much, Director. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the change order. Second. Motion made by Councilman Paulson, seconded by Councilman Tupper. Open it up for questions and comments. Hearing none, the motion is to approve the change order. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We're on to old business. I did want to explain something to the council in regards to the Showmobile discussion. Just did some quick checking in. If the motion is to rescind declaring the Showmobile as surplus, then that would be the motion, would be to rescind. That I would consider under old business. If the motion is to have any bids brought back before council, that would be new business, because that would be something new. There cannot be a motion to reconsider. That must be done at the same meeting that the action was taken. A rescind motion also has to have notice, public notice attached to it prior to the meeting where anything could be rescinded. Both actions would, if you are going to go down the route of asking for a new motion to have all bids for the showmobile brought back to the city council, for instance, that would be new business. It was not on the agenda, therefore I would have to suspend the rules, which would require a 2/3 vote in order to suspend the rules to bring up something that was not on the agenda. The order to rescind, because it was not asked for prior to tonight's meeting, would also require a 2/3 vote. So either way, it's a 2/3 vote. My suggestion would be that we've already declared it surplus, so the motion, I think that the council, I do not want to speak for anyone who is going to make the motion, but if the council wants to have some control over what the bid would be, or if we accept it or if we don't, and if we put any stipulations on it, that would be a new order of business. So with that said, we are on old business, if anyone wants to discuss old business. Yep, Councilman Danforth?
Yeah, I'd like to, Mayor, just a point of clarification on that then. If there's a motion to require those bids to come here for review and consideration by the council, and let's say those bids are rejected, does that showmobile then, what happens? Does the surplus aspect of it go away? Does it get rebid? What happens at that point?
I would say I will defer to City Manager Mack, but my interpretation would be, it would be what it's at now, which is it would still be declared as surplus city property, but we are not getting rid of it. So the city would still own it, even though we have not taken action on it. It would be like declaring a car as surplus, but we haven't taken action to sell the car for 6 months, or a gun from the police station, so. Yep, Councilman, or City Manager Mack.
You can reject bids and remove it from the surplus list in the same action. So we could bring bids and you all could say the motion is to reject all bids and remove from the surplus property list.
Because personally, I think that's the route, Amanda, that we would want to go, because then what happens, it puts whoever is on this side of the desk again at that point of reconsidering the obsolescence of that, and then bids again how they want to handle it. But if for some reason they come back and if we're going to reject the bids, if that's what happens, then I like that idea of it, that we then rescind the obsolescence of it at the same time, so that anything would have to come back to us again.
Right, you'd have to redeclare it
Yeah.
as surplus
Yeah, I think
property
that's a
in the
pretty good
future if
idea.
that's the direction you want
Well,
to go.
and I don't disagree with that. That question was taking it a step further. The first action is to bring it back under our control, which would be to have a new motion to have any bids considered by the full council. So what we do after that, once the bids come in, and if we want to reject them all and keep it or sell it or whatever, or keep it for a year or whatever, that would be a motion for that time. The motion that we need right now, if you do not want the Park and Rec Board to consider and accept a bid, would be to have a special motion to declare any bids on the showmobile to be brought back for the full consideration of City Council. That would be new business. So, is there any old business? Councilman Tupper?
You really want me to get started on this? No. Okay. Old business, and I've seen this old business happen time and time again, and it's kind of, matter of fact, I called both the mayor and the city manager the other day and told them I lost something, and they asked me what it was, and I said my sense of humor. And that comes right from this right here, the Watertown Public Opinion, and its inability to edit anything that goes into it. Brad Johnson has had his say with what he does with the public opinion, and there's nobody there to edit whether there's any truth. And I think Heath kind of brought up a little bit of it tonight, and I think he probably purposely did to just let the public know that with this land swap we're doing in our new our new street facility, it's been made public for over a year. I mean, well, yes, there was some of it that had to be brought up in executive session, as long as right along with any other thing that's contractual, that sometimes it has to be brought up. You know, in his comments, I kind of highlighted a couple of them here. I'm just going to grab one, and I can't believe I can see why they're hardly anybody reads it anymore. Backroom political dealing is alive and well in Watertown as the council commits itself to spend well over $700,000. You know, and then he goes on to say the council clearly was briefed behind closed doors as the action passed quickly and unanimously at Monday afternoon's meeting with little effort to educate taxpayers. Crap. This has been brought up. I'm just going to say it the way it is. It's been brought up. It's been very public. To say that we slid things under the door and the council wasn't aware of it, this thing doesn't even make good toilet paper anymore. It's got me frustrated that we can allow one person in this community rip this community apart. And he has a tendency, I wish he was here tonight, he has a tendency of every time he writes something to be so negative about the city of Watertown. He's a businessman of Watertown. You would think he'd want to be positive, but evidently he has it out for the council, which he's had for years. He's a former council member himself. He knows how things on the council work. And for here, I take a lot of pride in the things that I do, and being on this council is one of them. But he makes it really hard to choke things down, so he can write anything he wants to about me. I don't care.
Thank you. Any further old business? Councilman Villauer.
I guess I'll just dovetail on what Councilman Tupper just said. I've got no problem with negative comments being written about us. But what frustrates me is when it's only the negative things. We have so much to be celebrating within this community. I mean, the ribbon cutting at Foundation Plaza, for example, outstanding event. Absolutely nothing reported on that in the public. And that's what frustrates me, is it's only the negative things that seem to be newsworthy.
Any further old business? Councilman Paulson.
I just want to say thank you to the rest of the council for finally saying something about that guy.
Attorney Carrico.
Thank you, Mayor. This has no subjective commentary, but merely to clarify for the public that under South Dakota statutes that, yes, we do go into executive session to negotiate contracts. If we didn't have the ability to do so, it would weaken our position in negotiating those agreements. But other than that, we have always limited our conversations to just the contractual negotiations. And therefore, when the contract came before us, council was already aware of a majority of the terms because they had been negotiated in executive session. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further old comments? I'll just say on the same topic, it's my pleasure to live in this community, always has been. I was born and grew up here. I love it here. I've traveled all over the place, and I've always wanted to come back, and no matter how old I get, I believe I always will want to come back because I think this is a fantastic place to live. And I know that the gentleman in question is not alone in, I'd say, being negative. And I know that there are other people that contact me as well. But I would just hope that people can see the positive in this community because the positive far outweighs the negative. So, Councilman Tupper?
Thank you for saying that, Mayor, because it's I got to take my frustration hat off, and I think I maybe found my sense of humor again. But you know, you wear that big W on your shirt every day, and that's what makes Watertown great. And I guess I shouldn't allow one person to set me off like that, but you know, I take a lot of pride in this, and I work with some of the best ladies and gentlemen in Watertown with the staff and in the council and city manager. I shouldn't allow his words to upset me so much, but there is so much positive going on in this community, and I guess maybe that's what I should concentrate on a little bit more. Thank you.
Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to point out that, you know, I did leave this community for college and for my first job, and I came back because of how amazing it is and trying to make a difference here to keep the momentum going. And you just brought up that great point that this is a very great community, and if you want to see backdoor dealings, go to larger cities because you will never know what's going on, and it's all backdoor. And I'm not trying to compare us to that, but there are just so many more things that could be happening that, you know, we have been very transparent from the moment you took the oath to be our mayor, and I couldn't be happier to be here and be back in Watertown.
Councilman Beeler?
I'm going to jump on the bandwagon a little bit myself. I do get tired of naysayers and negative innuendo and putting us in this light of a bunch of folks with big cigars and a bottle of whiskey in a dark room, making big deals. That is not happening. And I've worked with many different people on this council, and I can honestly look them in the eye and tell them that this is a group of honorable people. Everyone at this dais is honorable. Even Mike, I think, is. Yeah. But it does really get old. I suppose it helps to that negativity does help to sell papers, I guess, and there is always a group of people that are always going to be naysayers, and no matter what. So I'm kind of glad this got brought to light tonight, because it does get old getting picked at, like a fish in a barrel, year after year after year, when everybody's putting their best foot forward and they're working hard to do the best thing they can for the community. And yes, we do have a huge number of things that are positive that are going on in Watertown right now, and in part to this group, and all the good work and all the questions that are asked. And there's no backroom dealings going on here.
Councilman Danforth?
Well, I had to say it, but first of all, Randy, thank you for bringing it up, because my little fingers, I type with 2 fingers, and these little fingers have been just trying to hold back as best they can ever since I read that article the other day. And then I went like 3 pages farther, and it was deja vu all over again. It was, one's an editorial and one's the article, and they were one and the same. I know that staff, and I know that the people on this side of this desk respect opinions, and those opinions can be heard, should be heard, and should be considered. And I can understand the background to what his concern is, and those concerns can be shared and communicated without tearing down a body that is working our tails off and doing it right, whether the public agrees or don't agree. That's a whole other scenario. But to tear this body down, I take that very, very personal. I was very offended by it. Brad probably doesn't care that any one of us are offended, but there was so little fact and truth in those 2 editorial articles that I was shocked. I was extremely disappointed. And because like I said, you guys have said, I know the efforts that these people put in and staff put in. Doesn't mean we're always right. But that's BS to throw out like that and make insinuations like that. So enough said. Now I'm not going to type it with my fingers anymore.
Thank you. And that is a good point to make, that there is a difference between an editorial and a news article. And there is a big difference. I would also just defend this entire council. I would say anybody who does want to say something negative, on Facebook, any place else, if someone wants to enter a dialogue with me, I'm more than happy to talk about anything to anybody, and I will do so ahead of time, after the time, doesn't really matter, because that's our job, and I think that I speak for most, if not all of us. If anyone can cite a specific example where they reached out to any of us and we turned them down, where we do not want to talk with them because we want to keep something secret, that's a different matter. But until you can prove that, I'm going to defend the honor of this body. Councilman Schutte?
Thank you, Mayor, for your character and how you work through these things. And actually the entire council here, for me, I look at a scripture in Proverbs where it says a harsh word stirs up anger, but a kind word turns away wrath. And so sometimes maybe we inadvertently are on the end of speaking a harsh word and didn't realize it, or maybe out of ignorance. Sometimes facts, maybe there is willful ignorance, or maybe just trying to cause division with people out in the community. As long as we take the approach as being merciful and address things that need to be addressed, let's bring it up, and if there's something we need to learn from and grow from it, yes, let's do that. Let's evaluate it. As long as our character, as long as we do it in a way where we just learn. This is actually an opportunity for us to grow, and even tonight with this, to grow from and go, okay, you know what, let's, with a lot of everybody's perspectives tonight here, let's go about this with a merciful heart, if you will, and yes, address the things that need to be addressed, but also have that just keep that integrity, and we are. I'm not saying we're not. I guess I'm saying this more out of enthusiasm, that I can see that as a direction that I can tell in this council that we can continue to grow in this particular character trait as we govern together. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Beeler?
Just one more comment. I can't tell you how many people have asked me over the years, why in the hell do you do that job? And I know you've all had that question. I know you've had people ask, and of course I always tell them it's that $1.32 an hour that we make to do this, right? Yeah, no, that's not it. We do it because we care. We do it because we care about our community. We do it because we feel we can make a difference in how our community moves forward and helping people in this community. And, so that's why we do it. And everybody up here, we take a beating for doing what we do. And it's not like we're cutting the fat hog, that's for sure, in this job. Thanks.
I was about to say something, and then I'm offered it up. Yeah, no. I do have one more thing that I do want to say, and this isn't targeted at one person. This is more about the mindset, because to me, I think my job as mayor is to be philosophical at least a little bit about where I want this community to be, but also where I think that the entire community wants to be as well. I referenced earlier that the character of this body is honorable and positive. And when I say that, I mention our staff as well, because we've got great staff up here working in this building and throughout this community in all of our buildings. And it's not just the character of this body or this staff, it's the character of this community. Are we going to be a community that looks positively at the future, or are we going to look in the past and stick always assuming the worst with people? Always assuming that Watertown can't have nice things. No, we can, because we are, in and of ourselves, a fantastic entity. And having more positivity can only bring better things to this community. Now, we can disagree. I'm okay with that. But I just want to know, do you love Watertown? And if so, would it hurt to show it? Any further comments? Any further old business? On to new business. Councilman Danforth.
Okay, I'm not sure I exactly understood what you all did there before, but what I would like to do is I would like to draft a motion that requires the bids the information from the bids to come back to the council for final approval. And my guess is with that, it would probably come with a recommendation from the Park and Rec Board, I'm guessing. But that, I'm not sure how you want to wordsmith that that motion, but I would like it to come back here. I've heard a lot of things that I agree with, and it just seems very premature to me, and it may be something that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me in the long run. So I'd like to have it come back, and nothing else, it'll prompt some additional discussion, reconsideration potentially.
And I think City Manager Mack was going to say something too. We're not even sure if you make this motion, we're not even sure if it has to go in front of the Parks and Recreation Board.
It does not. So bids are due Wednesday. So staff will compile them and prepare a recommendation and bring, if that's the action that you all take, and bring it for your consideration on the 20th.
Councilman Villar, you had a question about that?
I'll second what he tried to say.
Okay, so okay. Attorney Carrico, City Manager Mack, I will say, I will take the motion to be, I move that all bids pursuant to the Showmobile will be brought back to the entire City Council for consideration and or action. And that action could be approving, denying, coming up with more codicils to attach onto it. Would that be adequate? Okay, so do I need to restate that? Okay. But first, in order to do this, we need to suspend the rules. So I need a motion to suspend the rules so that we can take up something that was not on tonight's agenda. I'll say motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Any discussion on suspension of the rules? Okay. All those in favor of suspending the rules so we can take up this action, please say aye. 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 Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay, we are now under consideration for the motion made by Councilman Danforth and seconded, now we can actually take the official motion from Councilman Danforth. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
And seconded by Councilman Vilhauer. Any discussion on making sure that any bid for the Showmobile comes back to the council? Actually, I would ask Mayor Karen, Director Sheehan, is it Director, CEO? President Sheehan. If either of you would like to say something, you sure can. Right, council, any further? Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. My only concern with this is that we take this action, and I feel like it is a direct disregard to the Park and Rec Board and what their recommendation was to us. I'm not saying that's a huge, I just wanted to point that out, that's my only concern with this is, I will welcome Bruce's comments on this because, why would they take an action to recommend this if it wasn't, their full intention, so.
Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your concern, Colin. But I will say, I don't think that will be a big issue with them. I think I can speak for that group as the liaison to that. And I think it comes to us for a reason, because we're getting a lot of public outcry for reconsideration on this thing. And I'm sure that they will understand that. They had a lot of facts and figures thrown at them as far as what the costs are and, all the resources necessary to operate that thing, which is it's important. But I do believe also that after hearing the public outcry, we do need to look at this and make a decision on our own. I think they'll understand that.
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. Just in respect to the director of the game, or no, I was going to say Game Fish and Parks. That was your quote from a couple months ago, Reed. But from the Parks and Rec Department and Forestry. And with the staff there, the time that it takes, and I can see why, and this is probably why we all approved it the first go-around, was because of the time that it takes. And if it were to get privatized and still in the community and useful within the community, I still see that as a valid option. But this motion, I believe, can help us to properly vet that to see if there is a valid option that will privatize it, still be useful, still can be used for those gigs, if you will, this summer, that have it reserved, and for future years. But again, it still just gives us some time to look through this and evaluate it, and nothing against the people bidding. We're still welcoming those bids because there may be the golden egg in there that works well for we get a win-win for the community. So we will see how that plays out in the couple weeks to come.
Councilman Beeler?
Thank you. This is another issue for new business if we're moving on.
Oh, yeah, we haven't voted on
Then
this
I'll-
yet. We're not done talking about the motion in front of us. Any further discussion on the motion in front of us? I would just say, Councilman Paulson, thank you for your concern for the Parks and Recreation and Forestry Board. I agree with them. Councilman Beeler spoke well about them. I think in this case, I would even defend them. They, as I think we did, financially made the right decision. But after that decision was made, both by us and the Park and Rec Board, considerations beyond financial have been brought forward. And I think that is what some of the community in this body is also taking into consideration now, because you can't justify every decision a city makes just on dollars and cents. You have to take into the soul of the community as well. So that is what I think the intent of this is, to at least have that discussion in front of the council. I would ask that at least some consideration is made to the Parks and Recreation Board, that they can at least help us or help us consider this. I would ask them. Maybe none of them are interested, because I do know that some of them have reached out to me after it has been declared a surplus, and they have had at least some questions about it, just wondering if we could at least hold on to it for a year or consider different things. So I think the willingness is there to explore options on their part, and not to muddle the process along, but I think out of respect for them, I wouldn't mind having at least some consideration. So, City Manager Mack?
Mayor, if I may, I'd just like to speak a little bit about the process. So certainly the recommendation definitely considered financial implications of the Showmobile. It also largely considered operational management of the Park and Rec Department. So as was mentioned earlier, the city provides a lot of services that don't make money. This is one of them. That really was not the consideration. It's about the time that it takes for city staff to haul this thing around, set it up, tear it down for events that are not city-run events. So I just want to make sure that is clear. Additionally, there was some talk about transparency at the beginning. This initial discussion happened over a year ago when we were putting together the 2023 budget. If you remember, the Park and Rec Department had originally requested, close to $300,000 to replace the Showmobile. And at that time, when I was preparing the manager's budget, I cut it out, and we had the discussion because of Foundation Plaza and the number of events that the city was producing. We felt that was a better investment. Also, you can't buy a new Showmobile anymore. They don't make them. So I just want to reiterate that while people don't pay attention at different parts of the conversation, it doesn't mean that the conversation wasn't happening quite some time ago. And whatever decision this body makes, we will support and enact and move forward with. But I just wanted to make sure that we were all remembering that this actually has been part of a discussion for a while, and the Park Rec Board did vet it, and then this body discussed it and made a decision. If you change your mind, that's fine. I'm not personally vested in this at all, but just making sure that we're following the right process, because this does, while this is a unique piece of infrastructure, it does potentially set some interesting precedent for how we dispose of property going forward, and I just want you to be mindful of that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, discussion? The motion is to require all bids to come on the showmobile to come back for the city council for final decision. All those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. We're on to new business. Councilman Beeler, did you have more new business?
Is it okay now?
Yes, now it is okay.
It's good? All right, thanks. No, just, I know I've beaten a dead horse here a little bit, but I do have some constituents that contact me continually in regards to the, that portion of the bike trail off Willow Creek Drive. And I know it looks like there's been some shoring up and a little bit of dirt work, but, it would be nice, I think, to get a stake in the ground that says when that's going to get done. You just can't continue to just go on and on and on. It's just dirt right now. It would be nice if we could find out somehow or another when, or put a date to that to say we need this done by such and such a date, especially before the summer's over and folks that want to come off Willow Creek and head to the north, they would be able to do that. So that's my concern.
City Manager Mack?
June 30th.
Concise comments, City Manager. Good job. Any further new business? Any liaison reports? Any announcements? City Manager Mack?
I have several. I'll be quick. Thank you, Mayor. So first, we do have a work session scheduled for next Monday at 4 p.m. We'll have the Commercial Lake discussion. We'll talk a bit about council procedures. The mayor has some additional changes he'd like to make to that ordinance, and you all discussed about changing the voting order. And I'll try to have a draft policy to go with the sales tax ordinance amendment. June 20th is our next council meeting, which is a Tuesday. The 19th is a holiday. And because the 20th is Election Day, the mayor's requested that we move that meeting to 3:30 p.m. instead of 5:30 p.m. So we will do that. Additionally, because the 4th of July is on a Tuesday, and that seems to be messing with quite a few people's schedules, the first meeting in July will be July 10th. And I'll be sending out some correspondence to all of you. We're going to do some council pictures, and we're going to do some onboarding with the full council, with any new members. And then there'll be a transition between the current council and the new council. We'll get that out. And then lastly, the State Fire School is being held in Watertown for the first time ever, June 15th through the 17th. There'll be about 500 participants here, and there'll be a special event in front of Foundation Plaza on the 15th, some water fights. So make sure you show up. That'll be kind of fun. And if you have questions about that weekend or what's going on, you can talk to Chief Rowland. That's all I have, Mayor.
I would add something. Next week's work session will also have an ordinance or an amendment to consider for council discussion on the Commercial Lake District zoning. City Councilman Villauer.
Thank you. I know she is always too modest to toot her own horn here, but I understand that for how many decades in a row now, we have received a special recognition. So with that, Finance Officer Bob Zine, tell us what I'm referring to.
Thank you. I was trying to fly under the radar. So no, the finance department did receive from GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, the annual report received our award again for 2021. So thanks.
And how many years in a row is that?
This is the 40th. Yep.
I didn't realize you were with the city for 40 years, Kristen. And now who's blushing?
Yep, exactly.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And please extend that to everyone in your department as well. Any more announcements? We do have a reason to go into executive session tonight to discuss a contractual matter. So the chair, and we will not take action when we come out. So with that, the chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session. Second. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to go into executive session. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed say nay. Motion carries.